The Independent this morning carried a very interesting article suggesting that President Putin had torpedoed Keir Starmer's efforts to play a role on the international stage. But the point is that Keir Starmer, who has barely arrived in power, has already had an impact internationally. And so Putin and Keir Starmer play distinct but interconnected roles. Putin, this long-standing, possibly dead leader of Russia, presents himself as a dominant figure in global politics, particularly through his invasion of Ukraine, his provocative stance towards NATO, his rhetoric, his actions, such as the threat of nuclear weapons, demonstrating a willingness to assert Russian power through fear and aggression, if not the demonstration of competence. And Putin's moves are calculated to test Western unity and resilience, making him a central figure in the global security landscape. Keir Starmer, on the other hand, this newly elected British Prime Minister, represents a different type of leadership, one that is still being defined. And his trip to Washington, where he met with US President Joe Biden, highlighted the UK's delicate position between supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia and managing domestic issues. And while Starmer has shown confidence in domestic affairs, particularly with his controversial decisions about pensioners, his insistence on locking people up who were rioting, his determination, his proactive stance, his global leadership, especially concerning the Ukraine conflict, has faced early challenges. And his meeting with Starmer and Biden, framed around the issue of whether to allow Ukraine to use the long-range Storm Shadow missiles in Russia, underscores his attempt to navigate the UK's foreign policy while responding to Putin's threat. So Storm Shadow is a system that is heavily dependent on satellite imagery, and the only country that has enough satellites to provide a complete coverage is the United States. So Starmer's stance that Putin started it is important. I mean, it's important to keep repeating that, and I think he makes a very good case. The delay on deciding about the use of the missiles, coupled with Putin's expulsion of British diplomats, showcases the tension between appeasement and confrontation in global diplomacy. But global diplomacy, as reported in the newspapers, is all that we hear. There's much more going on. And Putin's reactionary stance, expelling the diplomats, issuing warnings about NATO, emphasizes the broader goal of destabilizing Western alliances. And Putin's done very well in that. He's also taken advantage of the distraction of Brexit, of the distraction of America's disengagement from global affairs, its removal of its tanks, its removal of its troops from Afghanistan, and so on. Part of this Trump thing about America first. It's provided a vacuum in which Putin can perform on his own, but he can perform. And the suggestion that Putin may have successfully leveraged fear to delay Western action by threatening a broader conflict casts doubt on Starmer's earlier diplomatic efforts. But both figures are pivotal. And what I think is extraordinary about Starmer, I'm not a Labour supporter, I hasten to add. So this is I hope this comes across as a purely objective review. But what I think is impressive about Starmer is that he's now taken seriously, and that his name can be mentioned without a giggle in the same sentence as Putin's. Because both figures are pivotal. Putin as the antagonist who seeks to undermine Western unity, and Starmer as a protagonist, as a leader, still shaping his international identity, maybe, but nevertheless engaging and defining the issues. Putin started it. The failure to decisively address the Storm Shadow missile issue, I don't think undermines Starmer's credibility on the global stage, particularly as the world watches how leaders are responding to the ongoing conflict. Because Putin's irascible and impulsive rhetoric tells us that caution and care are needed at this point. And the contrast is between Starmer's caution and Putin's rancor. And it remains to be seen whether Starmer can combine his domestic decision, his decisiveness at home, with the toughness required to face down Putin's threats and maintain Britain's influence in the international arena, or indeed lead the Western allies. It's extraordinary that somebody who is so new on the world stage should be given this responsibility, but there is still a vacuum. It is not being filled by anyone. Biden is on his way out. Kamala Harris or whoever is going to take over is not there. And there is nobody else really stepping up. Starmer is taking the lead, and he's doing so with a display of caution. It's the right call.